Thank you all for having me. My talk tonight is going to be on a crazy little thing called love. And before I start, I'd like to thank Google Chrome, Tom Robbins, Rita Rudner, Ogden Nash, and Cole Porter for the information, observations, and more. And I'd also like to thank George Carlin for the cadence of my introduction. You see, John Coltrane gave us a love supreme. The Beatles gave us Love Is All You Need. There are love ballads and love birds. There's Love in C minor, and I love me some coconut cream pie. There's love detectors and love divines. Facebook has love emojis, and far too often there are unrealistic expectations of love. An invitation to a love fest might use a love font. Excuse me. I was part of the love generation, but I'm certainly no love guru. I've got love handles, and we all know for sure that love ain't no Hallmark movie. There are images of love, and we all have our love ideals. You can have a love Jones if you're a love junkie. Most folks love kissing, and you can tie a lover's knot. Shakespeare wrote Love's Labor's Lost, and some of us write love letters. There are love matches and love muchins. There are love nicknames, but no love ninjas. Many have written odes to love, and for some, love is an obsession. There are love potions and love poems. There are love quotes, but no love quotas. Most of us love romance, and all of us risk rejection. Love can inspire a tattoo, and we all know that love takes time. There's unconditional love and unrequited love. There's love verses and vows. Love has a vocabulary, but love probably isn't a verb. Samuel Coleridge loves Xanadu, and I love xenophiles. You can love your home, your house, and you darn sure ought to love yourself. There's love in Zimbabwe, and I'm pretty sure you don't have to profess love, or you don't profess love with cubic zirconium. And all that has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk about. You see, I've talked with old folks, young folks, white folks, black folks, Asian folks, Spanish-speaking folks, straight folks, gay folks, Hindu folks, evangelical folks, Muslim folks, Sikh folks, Unitarian folks, and atheists. I've talked with widows, widowers, teen brides, and former nuns. I've talked with drag queens, transsexuals, asexuals, and polyamorous. And I've talked with those swearing off love and those longing for love. And that, too, is not going to be what I'm going to talk about tonight. You see, I wasn't looking for universal answers, but rather common expectations, fears, concerns, and those I found. And that, too, isn't what I'm going to talk about tonight. You see, I will not be presumptuous and speak for anyone other than myself. And rest assured, I won't be giving any advice because I'm a 65-year-old, twice divorced man who's been single for nearly 25 years. But I will speak to something I know better than anybody else in the world. And that's my experience of this crazy little thing called love. Now, I'll begin by taking a trip back to the 50s when, as a prepubescent boy, I was sitting in front of my family's black and white television on a rainy spring night, and I experienced my first crush. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that was the night I fell in love with Lena Horne when she was singing Stormy Weather. Now, as a child, I'm sure I thought about love, dating, and marriage. While I don't remember those thoughts, Google Chrome led me to some young people, and I'd like to share some of their observations. Now, about falling in love, Manuel said, I think you're supposed to get shot with an arrow or something, but the rest isn't supposed to be so painful. Or May, who at age 9, said, nobody's sure why it happens, but I've heard that it's something to do with how you smell. That's why perfume and deodorant are so popular. Now, about dating, Sherm, age 8, said, all of a sudden people get movie fever, and that's so they can sit together in the dark. Or Lynette, age 8, who said, dates are for having fun, and people should use them to get to know each other. Even boys have something interesting to say if you listen long enough. Or Craig at age 9 said, many daters just eat pork chops and french fries and talk about love. Mike at age 10 said on the first date they just tell each other lies, and that usually gets them interested enough to go on a second date. Now, Alonzo at age 9 had a strategy for making people fall in love with you. He said, don't do things like having smelly green sneakers. You might get attention, but attention ain't the same thing as love. And Gavin at age 8 talked about why people hold hands. And he said they do that because they want to make sure their rings don't fall off because they paid good money for them. And John at age 9 said they're just practicing for when they might have to walk down the aisle someday and do that holy matrimony thing. Now, Gina at age 8 said, I know one reason kissing was created. It makes you feel warm all over. And they didn't always have electric heat or fireplaces or even stoves in their houses. And then this one's kind of profound. It was a young lady by the name of Anita at age 9 said, you know, when somebody's been dating for a while, the boy might propose to the girl. He says to her, I'll take you for a whole life, or at least until we have kids and get divorced. But they also had good advice about love. Dick at age 7 said, spend most of your time loving instead of going to work. Robbie said that sensitivity doesn't hurt. He's age 8. Aaron at age 8 said, be a good kisser. It might make your wife forget that you never take out the trash. And Natalie at age 9 said, now don't say you love somebody and then change your mind. Loving isn't like picking out a movie that you might want to watch. Now, as I was writing tonight's talk, I looked back at what I thought love was at different times in my life. From my first prepubescent crush to my first kiss. And then to my teenage years when I was convinced that no one had ever felt like I was feeling at the time. And I knew that the way I felt about Connie Alban, Betty Waymire, Sharon Martin, Patsy Halk, and Debbie Ragland, and I knew those were going to last forever. Now, looking back to my late teens and early 20s, I realized that each time I was falling in love, it was really just a matter of falling in love with what I needed at the time. My first marriage of some 43 years ago was exactly that. Now imagine, if you will, a lonely and naive sailor with no support group other than his shipmates. And in 1973, men certainly didn't talk about feelings, desires, and fears. Heck, we don't even do that now in 2016. And I was fearful. I was fearful of being alone. And I also had this unconscious and convoluted thought process that equated need with love. Yes, I assumed the role of the rescuer, being that knight in shining armor riding a white stallion. And in retrospect, I see that my behavior was guided by what Thomas Merton called an immature conscience, meaning that I put others above myself, and that pleasing others was far more important than pleasing myself. And in doing so, I lost complete sight of who I was. Needless to say, my armor became rusty and dented, and my white stallion not only pulled up lame, but he also became a gelding. Now, while that marriage didn't work, it did begin a period of intense personal growth. And I'm very thankful for that. Now, it's often said that we learn from our mistakes. However, we don't always remember those lessons. Hence, marriage number 2. And that ended 25 years ago. And that marriage wasn't about the aforementioned need to be the knight in shining armor, but it was more about being new to the community and the emotional need for support. Now, I'm from the generation that called ourselves sexually liberated, that time of love, David. And that has a unique dynamic for everyone. And I think intellectually we can say that we can tell sex apart from love, but it's not always that easy for me. It's been my experience that becoming, beg your pardon. It's been my experience that becoming lovers too early in a relationship has clouded my judgment, my understanding, and my expectations. And a perfect example of that is marriage number 2. You see, this lovely woman and I shared an intense passion that convinced us not only did we like one another, in turn that convinced us we loved one another, which in turn convinced us that we should get married. And please know I don't regret that marriage at all, because we were incredibly happy for a year and a half. The only problem was we were married for 4 years. Now, in retrospect, I've learned that while attraction and desire can be immediate, love sure isn't. For me, my time alone has been a matter of deciding what's right for me. Relationships aren't simple, and they've never been. There are open relationships, friends with benefits, casual flings, one-night stands, no string attached, and we left little room for exclusivity in our love lives. Call me old-fashioned, but I like the idea of being exclusive. And I believe we're all guided in aspects of our lives by the influence of role models. It might well be the positive role models of long and abiding relationships that we seek to emulate, or it might be the toxic behavior of the negative role models we eschew. I'm thankful the balance in my life has been on the positive side. I fondly remember the deep and abiding love of my parents and several aunts and uncles. Now, this isn't to say that their relationships were free of difficulties, but rather I remember the little and big things that they did for one another. Like, my father was a hairy man like me, and I always knew when he and my mom were getting along because he would shave at night. I thought that was quite a lovely thing for him to do. But then a favorite aunt and uncle was the big thing with him, because my aunt would visit her husband, my uncle, who had Alzheimer's. She said because I took that better or worse part seriously. So I love them for that. Now, I've learned many things over the years, and being a part of an event like this has given me the opportunity to articulate those lessons. I've realized that when I'm interested in someone, I always like to observe how they interact with others. How do they treat their parents, their siblings, their coworkers? But most importantly, how do they treat people in service occupations? Because a thing to remember, if they don't treat the server right, they're probably not going to treat you right. Now, while I don't need or want someone who agrees with me on everything, I think it is essential to share some common values and a common worldview. And I've learned that emotionally healthy relationships develop over time. And I recognize and accept the fact that relationships aren't always going to be perfect. The scales won't always be balanced, but I believe it is important to strive for that. To paraphrase Paul Sweeney, he said the anniversary of any relationship is a celebration of love, trust, partnership, tolerance, and tenacity. And the order of that varies from time to time. Now, I've learned that I might still, try as I might, I still attach mythology to romance and still have these romanticized notions of love and relationships. Early in my attraction to someone, I tend to idealize them, that person who is the object of my desire, and overlook the little things I'm going to find aggravating as hell later on. Now, a very wise friend once told me that jealousy happens because we assume there is only a limited amount of love and attention available, and that any given to others is taking away from us. What an incredibly brilliant insight. And I know it's a cliche, but I've learned that healthy relationships require clear communications. I'm grateful for the experience that it helped me to articulate feelings which preclude accumulated hurts. I've learned that I don't mind being told if I do something wrong, but I want that to be balanced out by being told when I do something right. Now, I've learned that expecting someone to know intuitively what I'm feeling or thinking is really laying the foundation for disappointment. I've learned I cannot and must not make others pay for the shortcomings of earlier relationships. And now that understanding allows me to forego accepting the sins of any previous men as my own, because I'm sure I'm going to screw up enough all by myself. Now, I've come to terms with the fact that I really like being considerate because of the way it makes me feel and not because I expect something in return. But I also believe if I'm considerate of others, I should really start with the person that's most important to me. Now, in my 25 years of single, I've come to understand that my time alone hasn't been a waste, nor does it mean that I'm broken. My time alone is how I've found the strength to take risks, to be bold. My time alone has allowed me to clarify and live the life that I choose. I come to realize that kindness and generosity are the guiding factors in my life, and I want that in any future relationship. And I said I wasn't going to give advice, but I've changed my mind. Here's a paraphrased bit of advice from Ogden Nash, who wrote, "To keep your relationship brimming with love in the loving cup. Whenever you're wrong, admit it. Whenever you're right, shut up." In closing, I'd like to steal a few lines from Cole Porter, who wrote, "Birds do it, bees do it, even educated fleas do it. In Spain, the best upper sets do it, Lithuanians and Letts do it. In shallow shoals, English souls do it, goldfish in the privacy of bowls do it. The dragonflies in the reeds do it, sentimental centipedes do it. So let's do it. Let's fall in love." Thank you.